So I think we have a support article also about this user management. Okay, user management in Oracle. All right, so we'll look at the user management in Oracle, how it happens. You can see there are so many subtopics that we have, like checking all the users inside the database, which we have already done. Checking the current user, which you know, show user is the command. How to lock and unlock the user inside the database. How to create a new user. How to change the password. I think that there is a spelling mistake. Change user password. How to check the database default tablespace and user default tablespace. How to change the user's default tablespace, and what is tablespace quota. Let us quickly walk through all these user management queries and will execute all of them in my database. So user management, we all know, like without users you won't be allowed, or you won't be able to allow other users to connect to the database. You cannot give everyone this as user privilege, and as a DBA it's your responsibility to hold this as user privilege with yourself. Don't share this as credentials with anyone. You are a DBA for a reason. If there is a user who says like I need a DBA, I need the login for this sys user, always ask the reason, because if you give sys user privileges, they might corrupt the database. They might not have the intention, but their queries might damage the database. So make sure you don't do these kind of stuff in real time. Where is it? Okay, so how do we check all the users inside the database? We know that there is a view db_users, and this view will allow us to check all the users inside the database. So select username, this will give the name of the user, and account status, what is the exact status of the account, and the default table space. So when the particular user creates or inserts data into a table, which table space the data will be inserted. So let me run this query for you guys. Okay, let us arrange this one. Column username for A30 should be good. All right. Can you see we do have so many users inside the database, but if you see their account status, it is expired and locked. That means their password has expired and the account is locked. The default table space, you can see it is system table space. Over here you can see for these users the default table space is sysocs table space, and we have some users for which the default table space is users table space. Now don't worry about all this. As I mentioned earlier, you are not supposed to delete or play around with these users, because this is what comes default with your database. Now if you look at this sys user, you can see the account status is open, and for the sys user, if you try to create any table, it will by default go to the system table space. So this is very important view, and this is very important query. You almost use it day in, day out in real time. So in SQL Plus, if you type 1, it will give you the last executed query. Okay, or actually the first line of the last executed query. So you can see select username, account status, default table space from db_users. Very important query. Like if I'm working on databases, I almost use it daily. We know how to check the current user inside the database. Show user. How do you lock and unlock a user? Alter user, give the username, and then specify account lock or account unlock, whatever you want to do, right? So in the same way, with the same commands, we can definitely we can unlock all these unlocked accounts, but I don't want you to mess around with these users, because until unless you know why we specifically use the users, don't play around with these users. Create a new user, like how we are going to do, and then lock and unlock. We'll do it. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a new user, And the command is very simple. Create user USR1 and identified by USR1. This way you are specifying the username and the password that you want to create inside the database. Hit enter. You can see the user is created. Now let me query this one. Select username, account status, default table space from db_users. Now I'll use a where clause because I don't want to see all other outputs. Where username like USR1. Can you see we have this username USR1? The account status is open because we just now created the user, and the default table space for this user is users table space. This is automatically assigned by Oracle. Don't worry about it. You can always change the default table space. But right now, my focus is on account status. How do I lock and unlock the account? I can see this user account is open. That means this user will be able to connect to the database. Now again, connecting to the database has different clauses. There are permissions and other stuff that needs to be given. But for now, if the account status is open, that means user account is active. So alter user USR1 account lock. Sorry, can you see the account is locked? If I run this query again, can you see the account is locked? Now the user won't be able to connect to the database because the account is locked. If you want to unlock the user, the command is very simple. Alter user USR1 account unlock. Okay, and run this query again. We see now the account is open. So these simple queries will allow you to have control over users to lock and unlock their account. So we have created a new user, we have locked and unlocked the user. How do you change the password of a user? Alter user USR1 identified by, you are defining a new password. And let's take, I want to just say Oracle. Can you see the user is altered? So now the user one should use password as Oracle. Again, guys, there is one more thing that I want to mention because we are at passwords right now. If you are using complex password in the query, make sure you specify it in single quotes. For example, alter user USR1 identified by, let's take you want to use uppercase, lowercase, so time pass and then hash 143 and then something like this. If you want to specify uppercase and lowercase, then make sure you're specifying the password in single quotes. All the complex passwords must be specified in single quotes. Why am I saying this? Because if you use a statement like this, SQL is not a case sensitive language. So for if you specify this one, and in this one, if you specify time pass, T capital and other small letters, then Oracle will still consider all of it as small letters. So still you'll be able to log into the database. So for all the complex passwords, make sure, or rather, I'll put it like this. If you are specifying passwords, always use single quotes. So what mistake I did? I think double quotes. Sorry guys. Alter user USR1 identified by time pass hash 143. Yeah, you have to use double quotes for all the complex passwords. So now if you want to connect to the database with the USR1, make sure you give this exact password. So it is case sensitive, it has special characters. So for all the passwords, forget about this query. I would suggest you to always use double quotes. Forget about this query. All right. So how do you change the password? Alter user username identified by the new password. How do you check the default table space? We already
Hi,
know how
Arun.
to.
Sorry,
Yes, Raman.
Ravan again here. So how can we change the account status expired to the open so we can be unlocked to lock? We can do that
Right,
one.
right,
So
right. That's something you will learn in profile management, not now. So hold on till that topic because
okay,
it's
thank
part
you.
of profiles. Yeah. So check database default table space. We already know how to check the default table space of the user. Okay. I'm repeating, guys, pay attention to what I say. We know how to check the default table space for the user, but this is we are talking about checking default table space for the database. Can you see database default table space? It is not the user default table space. So when you create a new user without specifying a default table space, can you see our query? Where is our query? Create user. When I created this user, I did not specify the default table space. I just created the user. So how did Oracle assign users as the default table space to user one? Let's come back to this. So when you create a new user without specifying a default table space, database default table space is assigned to the user. So use below command to find database default table space. In your database, the database has a default table space which which is used if you create a user without defining a default table space. That table space will act as the default table space. So let me query this one. Okay, so the view that we are querying is database underscore properties. Now in this view, we have property name and property value. So what we are saying is property name, wherever it contains default, we want to have it in the output. Can you see over here, there is a property called as default permanent table space. It is users. So from this property, when I created the user one, the user's table space is assigned as default. All right. So if you create a user without defining a default table space, then depending on whatever table space is in your database properties, the default permanent table space will be assigned to the user. It is very simple. So from this setting is where you get the default table space for any new user you create. So the question is, can I create a user by defining a different default table space? Of course. So I think we have the command over here. Can you see create user user2 identified by user2 default table space and give the table space name. What I would do is I would actually give the default table space as system. Can you see the user is created and this user default table space is system. So let us query db underscore users, select username comma status comma default table space from dba underscore users where username like usr%. Okay, select user name is status default table space from db underscore users username like, sorry, there's no status column in this one. Sorry guys. And then go query the default table space. That's account status, not status. Can you see for user one, the default table space is coming from default permanent table space property. But for the user two, I specified in the create user statement that the default table space should be system. So this is something you need to make sure. And for freshers, don't worry when you create new users inside database in real time. Most of the times your client will give you the default table space. So you create the user with the username that they provide, the password that they provide, the default table space that they mention, and also the permissions that they tell you to assign to the user. So all this will be given to you by the client. So how do you change the user default table space? This is good. And let's say for user 2, I want to change it from system to users. So alter user USR2 default table space to users. So now what I did is for user 2, I changed the default table space from system to users. All right, let me run this query, and can you see the default table spaces are users for both the user. Guys, one quick question, anyone can answer. And okay, I would suggest no experienced DBA will answer this question. Only freshers, they should answer, right? So we have an HR user. The default table space for the HR is users, okay? And HR user created 10 tables inside this table space. After some time, you change the default table space like how I did just now from users to ABC table space. What happens to these old 10 table spaces? Oh, sorry, tables, which are residing under user table space. Anyone wants to take guess? So the HR user default table space has been changed to ABC. Earlier, HR user created 10 tables which reside under users table space. Now the default table space is ABC. What happens to these old 10 tables?
The old 10 tables will be migrated to the new table space.
Anyone else want to take a guess? All right, and now I'll open it for the experienced DBAs. Anyone wants to take a guess?
They will be in users table space only.
Perfect. So guys, there is no change to the existing tables. So how do you think or look at these things? Table spaces, these are your table spaces, right? So table space is nothing but it is same as drives. So if you have stored 10 tables or 10 files in your C drive, that means what is the default drive? Okay, let me come to this one. So for a user like HR, he's a Windows user. Okay, so on Windows, we are specifying like the default drive is C drive. That means any file that is created by the HR user, it will be stored in the C drive. That is default drive. Now, after some time, I changed it to D drive. So any new files that are created by the HR user, they will be created under D drive because that's the new default drive, right? So, but all the old file will still reside in C drive, right? I mean, why would you want to migrate them, or what's the reason for the migration? So the same way inside the database, the HR user is there, right? So we assigned earlier a default table space of users. What is the default table space? That means any new table that is created by the user, it will reside in the default table space. All right. And after some time, if you change the default table space, that means from that point of time, the new tables that are being created, they will reside under the new table space. But the old tables, they will continue to reside in the old table space. Nothing will happen to them and they will happily reside in the same location. No migration, nothing will happen inside the database. This is a big confusion all the fresher DBAs have. So there is no migration, it will reside in the same location. All right, so let us look at one more topic and then we'll wind up. Tablespace quota. When you create a table space and the table space is assigned to a user, you can define the quota as to how much table space can be used by the user. right? So you can specify a limit onto how much table space quota or the size a user can use with below command. So you can define like alter user1 quota 10 MB on user's table space. That means the user1 will never use anything above 10 MB inside the user's table space. So there is a note, guys, allocating quota doesn't represent reserving of the space. This doesn't mean that 10 MB has been reserved by the user one. No. If the user one wants to use it, maximum he can use 10 MB from the user's table space. Beyond that, like if two or more users are sharing a table space, quota will be filled up in first come first serve basis. For you to understand this, let me give you a small example. So you have a table space of 1 GB. This is 1 GB size table space, right? So you have user 1, user 2. User 1 has unlimited quota on this table space. That is example users table space, right? And user 2 has 100 MB of quota on the same table space. So for user 1, what is the max limit? User 1's max limit is 1 GB. That means user 1 can use 1 GB of this table space. For user 2, the maximum the user can use is 100 MB. All right. Now in this case, let us assume the user 1 has used the entire table space and now there is only 50 MB left. So it is not the fault of user 1. The space utilization depends on the first come first serve basis. User 1 came first, user 1 had quota and the table space had free space. So Oracle gave priority to user 1. Now user 2 is trying to insert data of 100 MB. It will get an error that there is no space inside the table space. So reserving a quota does not mean that particular size is reserved on the table space. No, it is still first come first serve basis. Whichever users come first tries to utilize the space, they get the priority. Let us take second scenario, the same scenario, and in this scenario the user 2 used 100 MB, complete 100 MB, right? So this 100 MB is used by the user 2. Now user 1 is trying to insert data of 1 GB. The table space size is again 1 GB. So this part, guys, this is 1 GB minus 100 MB, right? So user 1 query will fail because it is trying to insert 1 GB data. So there is no fault of the user 1 and there is no fault of the user 2 also. User 2 utilized max 100 MB based on its own quota that was allocated. User 1 has unlimited quota, but the data that the user 1 is trying to insert, that is 1 GB, we do not have 1 GB space on the table space. So it will get an error. So in this case, the user 1 will contact DBA and he or she will ask you to increase the size on the table space. So quota on a table space does not mean you reserve the space. It is still first come first serve basis. All right, guys. So you have any doubts before we wind up our today's session?
Yeah, couple of questions. Arun. Now, what will happen once the quota is used entirely?
Again, you will get the same error. You do not have quota on the table space, then you need to contact the DBA.
Okay. Then one other question. There's a file called DBA underscore free underscore space.
Yeah.
This view also can be used to determine the free space, right? Instead of the query which you have provided.
Yes. You can use it, and I think I have a great article on database space. I don't know if this is the name. Let me give you the link of the article. I use it very frequently, but now I forgot about it. User management manual, copy, refresh, Oracle now. Mm, Table space, sorry, database size. I think that's the article topic. Check Oracle database size. I think this article will help you define, like even I included the queries of large database. For very big databases which runs in GBs and TBs, use this query. For exact database size, then you use this query. And analyzing query output, what is the reserved space of the entire database, how much is used, how much is free inside the database. This is how you get the output. And check users and space used. You can see like which user inside the database is using how much space inside the database. I think this is the great article for you to look at the free space inside the database.
Arun, while you showed an example of resizing the data file, right? System data file.
Right.
Yeah, but sometimes like there will be the size will be in the decimal format. So how should I resize it? Like,
Yeah, that depends on the how you divide the bytes column. So over here, bytes column is divided by 1024 becomes kilobytes. If you divide it by 1024, the output will become megabytes. If you divide it by 1024, it will become GB. Can you see GB? So
yes.
if you remove this last part, then it will be into MBs, and I think that point of time you won't see decimals. So remove that one last 1024 and it should give you good output.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And guys, if you have those silly doubts, you can always use Google Translator like MB to GB, MB to, sorry, GB. Use this converter, and if you have an output like 0.845, and then you can see it is 845 MBs. All right, Mitesh, so you can use this kind of calculator for your easy understanding. This will help you.
Yeah, because in one of the tablespace administration example, you explained about stringing and all that. So I was
Correct. In the same example, I did mention about converting it from GB to MB. Remember?
yeah,
I
yeah.
removed the last 1024. Yeah.